Hey everyone out there, beautiful day today where I'm at. I hope it's nice where you are. I was playing with my dog in the house today and I thought, you know what, let me bring her up and show you guys. So here's Bjorn. Come on, Bjorn. Come on. There she is. Hey, you can say hi. There, hey, hey. That's my baby Bjorn, little golden retriever. So I just wanted to say hi, and she wanted to say hi. I heard her, screaming for you guys. So anyways, I'm going to put you down. Bye, Bjorn. Bye, girl. There you go. All right, let's hop in. I actually don't have a review for you, so let me go back real quick. Kind of unprepared here. But it was a significant last chapter. I think the quick review is Achilles was killed. So an arrow was sent straight to his Achilles' heel. So he's no longer with us. It's intense. So that was a crazy, crazy chapter last time. And then if you remember at the end, Ajax fell on his sword because he felt horrible and guilty for what he had done, when in reality, it seemed like a god had made him drunk inside and he did these things. So it wasn't even really his fault. So that's kind of tragic as well. So that was last chapter. What we're going to get to today is called Poisoned Arrow. Now let me show you an image of this one. When the Greeks found Ajax dead by his own hand, they lamented for him, so that all the seashore was loud with their sorrow. And Odysseus said, "Would that the Trojans had not awarded me the armor of Achilles, for rather would I have lost it to Ajax than that this more bitter loss should have come upon the whole war host." So basically what he's saying is, I'm happy I got Achilles' armor because it's this nice gift, but it's not nowhere near worth what we lost. So I would give it all back for that. And they burned and buried Ajax's body and lamented over him as they had lamented over Achilles. They knew that, though they had slain Hector and defeated the Amazons and the dark army of Memnon, and had the luck of Troy in their keeping or in their hands, they had lost too many of their own champions and were no nearer to taking the city in Helen than they had been 10 years ago. So imagine this war, this battling has been going on for 10 years, both sides losing people that they really loved and cared about. So, they're kind of thinking, was this war even worth it? So, near to despair or just extreme sadness, they went to Calchas, their soothsayer, and begged him to tell them what to do. Calchas looked into the dark places within himself and listened to the voices that spoke there and told them, "Fetch Philoctetes, the archer from the island of Lemnos, for the word of the gods is that we shall not take Troy without his aid." Now the Greeks had landed on Lemnos to take on fresh water on their way to Troy 10 years before. And there, one of their number, so one of their friends or their co-workers in a way in this battle, Philoctetes, had fought a poisonous dragon who lived among the hills. The dragon had bitten him in the foot, and though he had killed it at last, the wound did not heal but dripped with venom and gave off a sickening stench. So you can imagine just something disgusting smelling now in this guy's foot. Philoctetes, in agony, kept the camp awake at night with his cries. So he's hurting so badly. He's like, "Oh, my foot," and nobody can sleep. The Greeks had grieved for him. They were sad about it, but could not bear to have him with them in the close quarters of a ship, and so had left him behind on the desolate isle when they sailed on their way. So he stank so bad, he was crying all the time, and the Greeks said, "Listen, we love this guy, but we got to leave him because we can't handle that." So they sailed off without him and left him on this island. But now, late in the day, the gods were telling Calchas that they could not gain Troy without this man. So Diomedes and Odysseus set sail to fetch him. And landing on the forsaken or forgotten shore, they heard his familiar cries of pain and despair, which guided them to a cave among the coastwise rocks. So maybe that's that cave where the guy is in. I just noticed Bjorn is back there lying on her back this whole time. But anyways. And there they found him, piteous and terrible, worn to a skeleton with long matted hair and beard, and eyes sunk deep into his head. It looks awful. He lay moaning on a great pile of seabirds' feathers, his bow and arrows lying ready to his hand. So he's like, and all the cave floor littered with the feathers and bones of the birds that he had shot for food, and his wounded foot still oozing with the stinking venom. When he saw Odysseus and Diomedes coming, he seized his bow and fitted an arrow dipped in his own poison to the string. But they held up their hands in the sign that they came in peace, and he laid the bow down again and let them draw near. Ooh, lucky for them. That would have been nasty to get their own spear inside them, or their own little arrow just with that poison. I mean, imagine if it hit you here and you've got this stinking ooze. Ugh. They sat on the rocks and told him the reason for their coming, and promised that if he came with them, his wound should be tended and they would do all that they could to make amends for having deserted him. Philoctetes listened to them and at last said that he would return with them to Troy. So the rowers laid him on a litter and carried him down to the ship. Odysseus bathed the wound with water warmed over driftwood fire. So I guess they're trying to make him better. And poured oil into it and bound his foot with soft linen. They gave him supper and wine such as he had not tasted for 10 years. And next morning they sailed for Troy. I mean, just imagine being on that island all alone for 10 years with this stinking, disgusting foot. Fair winds brought them swiftly to the shore where the black ships lay, and they carried him up to Agamemnon's hall, where the high king made him welcome, and Machaon the healer did all that could be done for his foot. They gave him woman slaves to tend him, and 20 well-broken horses and vessels of fine bronze. They bathed him and cut and combed his hair, and gave him a robe from the king's own chest to replace his rags. And soon, feeling the strength coming back to him, he was eager to carry his bow into battle and send his arrows, he still had some that were poisoned, right into the Trojans. The Greeks thought it an ill thing to use venomed arrowheads, but Philoctetes said, "This is the skill that I have learned in 10 long years. If now you would have my help, then you must have it in my way." The next time the Greeks went up against the high walls of the city, and Paris on the ramparts was loosing his arrows down into the midst of them, Philoctetes saw him and cried out mocking, "Very proud you must be of your archer's skill, and of your arrow that slew the great Achilles. Yet I also have my skill, and the bow in my hands was drawn by the mighty Heracles himself." He set an arrow to the bowstring and drew and loosed all in one swift movement. The bowstring rang and the arrow sped on its way. It grazed the hand of Paris. No more, but within 3 heartbeats of time, the poison was about its work. You know, sometimes poison, if you even get a little bit, it can come into your body and creep in. The bitter pain woke and grew and spread like fire within Paris, and with a cry, he fell to the ground. The Trojans carried him back into the city, and the physicians tended him all night long, but nothing eased his agony, nothing made him feel better. And at dawn he cried out, "There is but one hope for me. Take me to the nymph Oenone, who dwells at the foot of Mount Ida." Do you guys remember Oenone from all the way back? That was Paris's girlfriend that he just left. Remember when he took Helen? He just left Oenone. Now he wants to go back to have her heal him. It was 10 years ago or more, probably a lot more actually. Then his friends laid him on a litter and carried him up through the steep woods by the path that he had followed so often when he was young and going to visit his love, but had not followed for many a long year. At last his bearers came to Oenone's cave and smelled the sweet smoke of her cedar wood fire and heard the sad low notes of the song that she was singing. Man, could you imagine being Oenone right now and this guy shows up? Like, what would you feel like? Paris called her, and she heard his voice and came out and stood in the cave entrance, pale as a moon moth against the firelit dark behind her. The bearers set the litter down at her feet, and Paris reached out to touch her knees, beseeching her mercy. "Please, But she drew back, gathering her robe closer around her. "Lady," he pleaded, "do not hate me, do not deny me so, for this pain is more than I can bear. Truly, it was not of my own free will that I left you lonely here, for the fates themselves led me to Helen, and I wish that I had died in your arms before ever I saw her face. Have pity on me for the love that was once between us, and do not let me die in agony at your feet." What would you say? But Oenone answered him in a small, cold voice. "It is over long since you left me for the love of Helen. Surely she is fairer than I am and better able to help you. Go back to her now and let her take away your pain." And she turned and went back into the cave and flung herself down weeping beside her fire. Yet in a while her heart softened. She rose and went back to the cave entrance, thinking to find Paris still lying there. But with his last hope gone, he had bidden his bearers to carry him away into the dark of the forest, as a dying beast seeks the wild. And even as Oenone stood in her cave mouth, gazing about her for some sign of him, he was already dead. His bearers carried his body swiftly down through the crowding oak woods back to the city. And there his mother wailed for him, leading the other women in their neat keening, and Helen sang the death songs over him as she had done over Hector, remembering what had once been between them. The people raised a great pile of dry wood and laid his body on it, and set fire to the brushwood so that the flames leapt up through the darkness toward the sky. So Paris is now dead, and they're burning his body. They're basically cremating it. Meanwhile, Oenone was roaming through the dark woods, crying and calling for her love like a lioness whose cubs the hunters have carried away. At last she saw the flames of the pyre far below her, and she knew their meaning all too well. Then she cried out that now Paris was all hers, and that though living he had left her for another love, in death they should be together and never parted any more. And she began to run, down through the steep oak woods, down through the thickets where the wood nymphs were wailing for him, out over the plain to where a great throng of Trojans was gathered about the blazing pyre. She pulled her veil close over her head like a bride, and, speeding through the crowd that parted to let her pass, she leapt upon the high-piled fire into the very midst of it, where the flame tongues leapt as though to lick the stars. And she flung herself down beside the body of Paris, clasping it in her arms. Wow. So the fire took them both. And when the flames died down, men gathered their mingled ashes into a golden cup, and set the cup in a stone chamber, and piled the dark earth over it all. And long after, the wood nymphs planted 2 briar roses on the grave mound, which, as they grew, leaned to each other and plaited their arching sprays together until they seemed not 2, but 1. Wow. So Oenone literally jumped onto the fire where Paris's dead body was burning. She was alive. She literally burned herself alive with Paris. Unbelievable. That's just insane. Well, at least it feels insane to me. I mean, maybe the question should be to you guys. Does that make sense to you? Does it make sense for her to run and jump into the fire? It seems a little crazy to me, but maybe you have a different perspective. I'm curious about that. So let's do as a face, let's do Oenone when she jumps into the fire. Now, this is an interesting face because I think many of us would think, man, I'm going to jump into a fire. I'm going to be scared. I'm going to be like, but it sounds like, and it definitely seems like Oenone wanted to do this. She chose to do it. She wanted to be with Paris, potentially in what she believed was an afterlife with him. I'm not sure. So think about that when you're doing your face, right? Here is my face when she's jumping in the fire. Now I do that face. Normally I'm not going to explain the face, but I think she's contented. She's calm because she has made this decision. Although I think it's a kind of crazy decision personally. She made it and she seems to be pretty calm and this is what I want to do. So that is it for this chapter. Thanks for hopping on. It's been fun. I'm glad you got to meet Bjorn a little bit more. The next chapter is called The Wooden Horse. So this ought to be an interesting one. You might have heard something about this before in your life. I don't know. Most of us as adults have heard about this, even if we have not read the Iliad here by Homer. All right, guys. Good seeing you. Adios.